I'd like you all to welcome the great man himself, Werner Herzog.
Has anyone introduced you, Patrick Holland?
So I'm Patrick Holland, but you don't want to hear about me.
The person deepest behind everything at BBC Two, is that correct?
Well, it's an absolute privilege to be sitting here, but it's also an absolute privilege to be introducing a film or to be discussing a film which is going to be on BBC Two and which you've made for BBC Two. Can you maybe start with telling us how did the film come about?
Well, BBC approached me and they explained to me the 30th anniversary of Bruce Chatwin was only something like 10 months away. Would I be interested to make a film on Chatwin? And I immediately had the feeling, yes, there was something always dormant in me and it would be easy for me to do it. However, British Broadcasting Corporation at the beginning had apparently something of smaller size in mind and more something like, something for covering the anniversary of Chatwin's death. More like a brief biography and introduction by me and some of his work. And I immediately said, no, it should go much deeper. And of course, since I knew Catwin and we worked together and we had experiences together that were unusual and world views and traveling on foot, which is also unusual. So I think I should go much deeper. And I have to travel for that to Australia, to Patagonia. So bigger in size, and it has to have a part of voices. There should be music playing an important part, landscapes playing an important part. That's something you normally do not see when you see a film on a writer. And from then on, it was a wonderful flow of events, of voyages, of filming, of putting the film together, and it was a very, very intense and pleasant cooperation. I've hardly, you see, some of my shootings were plagued by deep problems and not enough funds and physical catastrophes, and I mean real physical catastrophes like 2 plane crashes we had during the shooting of Fitzcarraldo. So it's not a joke when I speak of real disaster. And this film came with a certain ease, and it was very natural. So a wonderful collaboration, and I have to thank you.
Well,
and of course, everyone who is here from the BBC. There is more than 5 or 8. Probably the BBC has to stop broadcasting because the whole institution is depleted tonight.
Because we're all here to discuss the film.
All of the BBC is here in this theatre at the moment.
And the film itself is such a powerful, moving piece. As you journeyed around the world, as you encountered, when we spoke on the phone some months ago, you discussed this as a series of encounters with Bruce Chatwin. How did that affect you personally? Did you feel Bruce's presence in the...
You can see it, you can tell when I'm speaking about the rucksack. I can't even pronounce the word rucksack. It's somehow my speech stops and I say, can you show it then? And you see, films, when it comes to such big emotional moments, films that you see, for example, on American television, inevitably become sentimental, tearful and sentimental, and I can't stand it. So I tried to be laconic. And as laconic as I was when Bruce was dying, he said, "Werner, I'm dying." And I said, "Bruce, I can see that." And it's a very laconic statement, but the pain that I mean, it was such a shock. Elizabeth said to me, "Werner, don't be frightened. Don't be frightened when you see Bruce." And I walked in, and that shock is still in me. It's unspeakable. So, the film never makes a fuss about it. It's straightforward, tries to be laconic, and I think it stays laconic. And whenever I'm bereft of words, I try to let Bruce speak, let him read from his book In Patagonia. And when we didn't have the end of song lines, I asked this anthropologist in Alice Springs, please read it for us. And sometimes when we didn't have a recording by Bruce, I would volunteer, and I said, I will step in and I will read now this passage that he never read in his recordings.
He's he's obviously extraordinarily present in the film, but he comes to the fore through his own writings and through that sense of his presence that you, as you say, through his writing, through his memoir, through the photographs that come through in Patagonia. But there aren't many photos of Bruce himself in the film.
Yes, he was a very fine photographer. I didn't go deep into it. Instead of showing many of his films, we see a very few, like the Shipwreck very early in the beginning, which was published in his book In Patagonia. But otherwise, I was more fascinated by, for example, tribal people, photos that were taken 100 years ago, very mysterious paintings of their bodies and mysterious dances. We do not even know the meaning of these photos, the meaning of the rituals. We have no clue, and it has disappeared. And knowing that Chatwin had been in the same museum where we located the photos, and he had seen these photos, I had the feeling, instead of showing many of his pictures that were not as significant, for example, there's a simple wooden cross, and I think it was the burial site of Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid and the son, what was the other name? The Billy the Kid and the whatever, were fleeing.
Butch Cassidy.
Butch Cassidy, yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Butch Cassidy. And it's a photo which has a certain charm, but it doesn't have the presence and the mystery of photos that were taken more than 100 years ago of Aboriginal ceremonies. And he was quite fascinated by that, never had an explanation, never had a full explanation of what Australian Aborigines really meant by song lines. And the song lines, in a way, as he describes it, are hotly disputed among in the community of anthropologists. But it doesn't matter. I did not want to go deep into it, because then I would need 4.5 more hours to explain the labyrinthic intricacies of exegesis of what the songlines were about.
And Bruce Chatwin, when I was in my early 20s, was a writer that I absolutely adored, and lots of my contemporaries were, you know, Chatwin was someone who we would often discuss, and he influenced a whole generation of travelers, of novelists. And yet, I mentioned earlier to you that I said to a very well-read 30-something the other day that I was talking to you about Bruce Chatwin this weekend, and he said, "Oh, who's Bruce Chatwin?" And that really surprised me. Is there a... Does it...
And he is from your house.
He does work at he works at the BBC.
Okay, yes, but it may happen that even the BBC has somebody young who doesn't know who Bruce Chatwin was.
Well, of course, but at the same time, I do, that Chatwin, when is no longer seen or read in the same way that he was 20 years ago.
Yes, but some of what he was as a writer has sunk in permanently. I just recently heard that in Patagonia, which is at the Penguin Classics now, has sold more than 1 million times, and it keeps selling. And for me, making this film had a subtext. It had a subtext. If, after seeing that film, anyone, one single person, rushes out to a bookstore or buys the book online at Amazon and reads in Patagonia or songlines, I have won the battle, one single. And of course, when you are speaking of television, and now we have the internet and YouTube and Netflix and all this, what I notice is even among the young filmmakers, and they are sitting here and they know exactly what I mean. Normally, as an average, they do not read enough. And I keep telling young filmmakers in my rogue film school, which is some sort of a wild guerrilla style counterposition against what you normally hear and see in film school, I keep telling them, you have to read. You have to read. If you do not read, I mean deep reading, not just tweets and Facebook entries. You will probably still become a filmmaker, but a mediocre at best. So what you have to do is read. That's what I tell them. And thank you very much. The subtext of Nomad is read Chatwin.
When it's extraordinary seeing the film, Bruce Chatwin wrote some great novels as well as writing his extraordinary travel work. And of course, you have made some great features as well as being a great documentarian. Does the way in which you both moved from fact to fiction, and that boundary between those two with both of your oeuvres, is that something that brought you together? Is that something which...
In a way, yes, sure. But my trajectory was from fiction to documentaries, and I have done quite a few documentaries now. But the more significant thing is that we believed that facts per se do not constitute truth. There was something deeper about it, more than just facts. And André Gide once famously, the French writer, once famously said about his writing, I modify facts in such a way that they resemble truth more than reality. And that's exactly a position that Bruce Chatwin had, and my position as a filmmaker as well. And for tomorrow at the conversation with audience, by the way, I have prepared a few clips from films where I can go right into this point, how I start to modify facts, and how they are not fake truth because of that, but they serve or fake news or whatever. They serve the purpose of looking deeper into what we may consider truth. So, by the way, if any one of you is planning to come tomorrow, it's an hour earlier, I believe at 10 instead of 11.
10 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that does put the artist, puts you as a filmmaker, Bruce Chatwin as a writer, in an elevated position, does it not? Because it means that you as a creative is drawing those fragments together to constitute a greater truth than just reflecting reality.
Yes, or just being descriptive, or just being somebody who believes, in my case, it would be not believing that documentary filmmaking is an extension of journalism. That's a very, very common mistake. And you see it in programs or festivals, not only here in Sheffield, you see it worldwide. The false idea that documentary is an extension of journalism. And when you look at Nomad, of course it is not journalism, it's something different. What exactly, I don't know. But it has something to do with poetry, it has something to do with music, something to do with a worldview, but it's not descriptive journalism.
What I mean, the film is a profound exploration of loss, as well as being a profound exploration of revelation and what those moments of revelation and insight are. What do you think that Bruce Chatwin would make of the modern world where that sense of loss permeates even more?
I keep wondering about it because I'm the survivor of the two of us, and I have seen the beginning and now the big spread of the internet and the disconnect between us and real human beings that we encounter. We have friends, only 2,700 friends on Facebook, but 2,695 we have never seen in our lives, and we'll never see them. So it's a strange disassociation of human connection. And the same thing, the strange disassociation of us being creatures who should travel on foot. Nobody travels on foot anymore. And he has done it, and I have done it sometimes. But I'm a lazy bum like everyone else, and I've done it only for existentially important reasons. Then I would set out traveling on foot, irrespective of the distance. So you don't start to count the kilometers or miles. And it's a very fundamental approach to human conversation, human experience, forming a worldview that was in Chatwin, and in a way, as I make films, a very similar approach and similar results in the different fields of culture. And so that was one of the things that I regret, that Bruce is not sitting here and discussing the internet with us and things that we are experiencing now.
I'll open it up for the audience to ask some questions in a second, but there was one final question I wanted to ask, which was, do you think that Bruce Chatwin's worldview was ultimately a pessimistic one, given that there is so much about lost cultures and the fragments of the past disintegrating and them being things that we could try to re-evoke, but they're ultimately lost? Or is there something redemptive in his writing?
I think with your description there was something profoundly solitary and sad in Bruce Chatwin. When you heard him speaking, he would, of course, burst out in laughter, but the laughter sounded more than pain. And he would have these very strange shrieks, and he would shriek, and you wouldn't know, is this a donkey braying? Is this pain or is it exuberance? But at the same time, and we shouldn't speak about redemption and all this, but at the same time, when you read Bruce Chatwin's books, this phenomenal curiosity, this phenomenal exuberance about exploring the world and stepping into the mind of foreigners and striking up a conversation in Patagonia or in Australia or wherever. It's just phenomenal, a phenomenal exuberance, the awe about the world as it is. And of course, neither he nor I will change the fact that we do not learn quickly enough how to deal with the internet, or that many things that I wish were different, and I can only be a voice out there like Bruce Chatwin is a voice out there. But great joy to make this film, and for me, when I think about his books and about this film, exuberance. That's the awe and the exuberance is what is resonating in me more than the shrieks of pain.
Well, the joy in the everyday, the joy in the moment as he meets people, as the joy as he makes the connections has got such a, and I use the word redemption, I suppose the word may also just be, it's just these extraordinary moments of just being in the moment where he just takes such delight.
But at the same time, always a vortex of laughter and death. Very strange. And when I say that, I mean, read his books and you will find out. Shall we hand it over to
let's have some questions. The microphones, can you just put the microphones up just there? There is a question just here. A gentleman in the middle with glasses, and then just whilst we'll get, if you could give the microphone to the woman there in the green as the next person.
Whoever
just
has
here,
it first
just here.
Who has a microphone? Can you please? Who has? Okay. I see a mic handed here.
Just here,
please
yes.
Start it out. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Herzog. I'm very proud that I'm here tonight.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Hello, Mr. Herzog.
Yeah.
I'm very proud. I'm happy to be here tonight. I came all over from Alexandria in Egypt, and I'm so happy to be here. Speaking about traveling, I knew that reading your book, one of the interviews, Herzog and Herzog, I knew that you have traveled when you were 16 or 17 years old by boat from Marseille to Alexandria, all the way down to Aswan, and then felt completely sick before going into sub-Saharan Africa to work on one of your projects. The book didn't contain a lot of information about this. I would like you to talk more about this and any idea or memories from you about Alexandria, the city that made you penetrate Africa.
Yes, I do remember Alexandria very well, and then going up the Nile River. But I think I have not spoken much about it because it was a very hard time. I fell ill, and I was in a precarious and a very lonesome position at that time, and not everything has to be explained and described. There are certain things where I'm reluctant to say much about it. I think what I've published in form of writing or in form of movies, they give a better insight into my movements, into my experience with the world. But I always understood before I read Bruce Chatwin's books and before I met him, I always had the feeling that traveling on foot gave me a deep insight into the very nature of the world and into the nature of people. It's very hard to describe for those who are not on foot. But by the way, the book Herzog and Herzog has a very, very fine new version of it, much longer, with 12 or so more films described, in some of my poetry in it, and some photos also in it, and it's called A Guide for the Perplexed, which is it's such a beautiful title. I have to confess I stole it from the great Jewish philosopher Maimonides, who was teaching philosophy in, I think, either in Seville or Cordoba in the 13th century. So the title is so phenomenally beautiful that I had to acquire it by theft.
The woman up there in the green.
Yeah, hello Herzog. It's really an honor to watch you.
Where are you?
Just here.
Here.
Yes, I see you.
Yes, really excited to watch the film with you, and I'm so inspired by your film. And I want to ask a question that is, I think it's the first film I saw in your film that you reviewed a lot of your older films. And we witnessed that a lot of famous directors, like you or maybe like Last Frontier, that when you are no longer young, you like to review your old films, kind of like it's say goodbye to your old days. And that indicates that maybe this is one of your last film. Or I don't know, I hope it's not. But we see that a lot of famous directors, they do this at their last films or something. So could you please explain that? What's the purpose of the review of your older films? Thank you so much.
You mean why I put some clips of my own films into Nomad?
Yeah, I understand in this film why you do this, but I'm saying that you indicate that it's one of your last films because lots of famous directors do this.
Which film is one of my last films?
I mean, are you suggesting that this may be your last film?
Oh no, wrong. Totally wrong, because I made yet a feature film after that. It's called, so I made, and you will eventually see it, hopefully. It's called Family Romance, LLC. It's a film I shot in Japan, in Japanese language, with Japanese actors. And it's somehow a return to some early filmmaking. When I did 23, 24, 25 years old, when I made Signs of Life, Even Dwarfs Started Small, or Gary, the Wrath of God, where I couldn't care less about completion bonds and rituals of financing of films. It was actually a film I financed out of my own pocket, without any assistance from anyone. And I'm proud that I was doing a very youthful film. So it's when you see Family Romance, it's a film as if I was back at 23. That's how it feels to me. The choice of the clips in there was obvious, because with Chatwin we spoke about the 10,000 windmills, and his remark about deranged landscapes, and of course the films that I made after he died, actually also filmed in Patagonia on Cerro Torre, where you see the climber climbing horizontally, vertically, and then dangling on one arm, on one hand. And that was something he never saw, but he admired that I did things in movie making without any cut, and as raw as it gets. And of course, the Viceroy of Widar, where he was on the set, and he loved the fact that I was able to summon a real king in the entire entourage. So the choice was quite obvious.
So we've got time for 2 more questions. Can we keep the questions about tonight's film? Just because I'm aware that there's a whole session tomorrow when you'll be able to ask.
Yes, there are questions you should ask tomorrow. Yeah.
Hi, Werner. First of all, thanks so much for that film. It was very touching. My question is about the fact that you've looked back on Bruce's life now as a nomad. How has that made you rethink your quest for the sublime and your quest to elicit the ecstatic truth in your filmmaking? If you can talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Well, my own quest, I don't even know what it is. I don't like introspection that much. So, but of course, looking at Catwin with taking an intense, close look at his life, at his writing, of course, has been very encouraging for me. It's not a coincidence that I did a feature film right after I finished Nomad. So it's like feeling a burning fire and rekindling some of the firewood that's still in me and wants to burn as well. So there's a lot that I would like to do now. I wish I could, instead of sitting here, shoot somewhere, let's say at the border with Scotland, at Hadrian's Wall. So that's where I should be right now. But it's, in a way, it's a fine moment of courage that I revisit. And that was the film.
One last question.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Hello, I did have a question, but it's not particularly
Can you
about...
speak up, please?
Hello.
Yes.
I just want to say that I watched Burden of Dreams this morning, and I was very struck by the fact that 40 years ago you were talking about the disappearance of kind of individual cultures and kind of corporate cultures. And I just wondered do you feel now that things have got worse? Do you feel, you were very kind of passionate about that 40 years ago. Does it feel that much worse, or is it just part of a continuum for you?
You are speaking of Burden of Dreams, is that correct? Or
Yes, Burden of Dreams.
Burden of Dreams, a film that I didn't make but Les Blanc. And of
Yes.
course it was a very specific situation that was plagued by difficulties, and of course moving a ship over a mountain is not an easy thing, because they're not made to fly over the church roof or something. Boats do something different. Looking back, and of course I've never left this kind of spirit behind. It has shifted into other sorts of projects, and I've always gone to some very outermost limits of what constitutes us as human beings. And I think this quest and this curiosity has guided me, and the courage to dig deep into it has guided me all the way to recent films on death row, for example, having a conversation with a man who would be dead 8 days later in the death chamber in Huntsville in Texas. So it has never really left me to explore and to try to find out what's the state of our human condition. And it's the same in a way, Aguirre and On Death Row and Bad Lieutenant and Bruce Chatwin and Family Romance LLC. So
does it feel worse?
Pardon?
Does it feel worse? I suppose because you were talking about how things were getting worse and how how everything was getting worse in terms of a kind of corporate culture that was taking over the world.
No, it
and
does
now you
not.
have the internet.
It does not. The corporate culture does not take over the world, because I'm not into a life of consumerism, and the corporate world has not taken over, and the corporate world of filmmaking has not taken over. And you can, it sounds like this kind of vibration of complaint. I assume you're a filmmaker. As a filmmaker today, you can, without the corporate world, without Hollywood, without the budgets of the film industry, you can make a narrative feature film for theaters, professionally for theaters, for under £20,000. And you can make a documentary under £5,000. I mean, a 1.5 hour documentary. You can make it easily for under £5,000. So just roll up your sleeves and don't speak of the corporate culture. You are the corporate culture from that moment on. And I don't like the culture of complaint. Roll up your sleeves and just do it. Okay.
So we have gone over time, but thank you ever so much, Werner Herzog. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you.